So, if you think this stuff right here that the game tells you is not enough, or you don't even trust what they tell you to begin with, one, you're not alone, and two, even if I didn't actually know what's going on here, I'd kind of take your side, because these days, with games, the odds are kind of in your favor. Even just a quick glance at the tire options available to your trucks will reveal a lot of questionable things. For example, 28-inch HS 1, 2, and 3 tires, they're the same size, same class, and apparently they have the same performance ratings as far as what the game tells you. But if you look at the tires, they look different and they're even priced differently. This to me already implies that there is actually some sort of meaningful functional difference between these three types of tires, despite the game saying otherwise. If you feel lost when you look at this stuff, don't worry, as it is kind of the case with most games. There's people in the community that are way ahead of you, so let's dive in and unpack tires. There are two main attributes I know of that affect tire performance: contact surface area with the ground and traction multipliers, which I know is technically called coefficients of friction, but I'm trying to make things simpler and more intuitive. The first one you can tell from just looking at the tires. The wider the tire, the more contact it makes with the ground, and the better your traction is going to be. Contact surface area with the ground can increase when going from smaller to larger tires, because larger sized tires don't just get taller, they get proportionately wider as well. It can also increase when switching from single to double tires of the same size. And last but not least, it can be increased by switching from normal to ultra wide tires. Double rear tires and wide tires also increase the width of your axles, which can improve stability and reduce the odds of tipping. The three things I just mentioned are what you can do to increase the amount of tire area on the same truck. You can of course simply switch to a truck with more wheels, or a truck with larger wheels and or access to tires that are inherently very wide for their diameter. The second attribute that affects tire performance is traction multipliers, which is an attribute that you cannot precisely measure from within the game. Fortunately, some players in the community pulled these numbers from the game files and put them on a spreadsheet, which they were nice enough to share with us. So, this right here is the spreadsheet. If you guys are interested in checking it out, I will link it down in the description below. As you guys can see up here, this spreadsheet was last updated on March 3rd, 2021. So yes, the authors of this spreadsheet are actually making updates to it to catch up with game updates in case the devs decides to change any of these values in the game. I will explain what these columns and these numbers actually mean in a moment, but first of all, let's scroll down to the bottom and we will find some information about the authors and the context of this spreadsheet. Apparently, this spreadsheet is produced by BladeChild X. He left his Reddit and Discord username down here so that you can contact him in case you realize that some of these numbers are off. I don't know who you are, BladeChild X, but thank you so very much for putting together this spreadsheet. It has helped me so much in my gameplay, and I hope it will do the same for my viewers. The author mentions that the idea for this spreadsheet is based off of something that somebody else posted earlier. If you click on this link right here, it will actually take you to this Reddit post. And if you click on this link right here, it will show you this sheet like this. And for whatever reason, if you just go on Google and search up SnowRunner's tire spreadsheet, this is the first result that pops up, even though this is nowhere near as updated as this one. So make sure that you do not click on this link and use this spreadsheet because it is very, very out of date. Again, I will link this spreadsheet that you should be using down in the description of this video. Now onto the data itself. The first column of numbers corresponds to the in-game stat body friction asphalt, which affects traction on uniced paved roads. This column is mostly irrelevant because even the worst trucks equipped with tires that have the lowest asphalt numbers can still easily make quick and safe progress on any paved road as long as it's not covered by ice, because they are surfaces with very few bumps or holes and only small inclines, which makes them inherently easy to drive on. And because of that, I am going to be ignoring this column for the rest of this video. The columns that we will want to be paying attention to are the second and third columns, which correspond to body friction and substance friction. The author labeled these two columns as dirt and mud. However, please keep in mind that on snow maps, body friction also affects hardened snow, which is white surfaces that you cannot sink your tires into. And substance friction also affects soft snow, which is snow that you can sink your tires into. This means that the best tires to run on any truck for soft snow is going to be one of its off-road tires or mud tires, not chain tires. Chain tires do perform well on dirt and hard snow, but they are nowhere near the top in mud and soft snow. In-game, as in real life, they are actually meant for ice, which is effectively a fourth type of surface in the game. BladeChild X might not have mentioned this in his spreadsheet, but the author of the original spreadsheet actually mentioned that chain tires have an additional ignore ice flag set, which I assume is the attribute that makes them perform noticeably better on ice, ice-plated roads, and ice-plated rocks. We will discuss chain tires a little bit more near the end of the video. When we combine the info on the spreadsheet with the in-game context, we can easily tell which are the best tires to run on different trucks in different situations. But before we go do that, notice that I said we need to combine these numbers with the in-game context, and that's because these numbers don't actually tell the whole story. Like I said earlier, contact surface area also affect traction, and on top of that, traction in general isn't even the whole story because tires can also affect ground clearance and stability, both of which are important attributes that you need to consider. With that said, let's talk about which are the best tires to run on all of the trucks in the game. So I thought about it and decided to do some extra preparation for this section of the video. I split BladeChild's big spreadsheet into 5 small ones and added some extra labels, a new color coding scheme, and pictures on the side to show you which trucks each category covers. We already talked about why I recommend ignoring the asphalt column. I want to talk a little bit on the logic between choosing trade-offs between these two columns. It's actually pretty simple for me, actually. The same number of points in this column definitely is going to weigh quite a bit more than this column, because similar to asphalt, you don't really need really good tires to drive on dirt as well. Dirt is certainly not always flat and straight like asphalt sections of the map are, but they're definitely nowhere near as challenging and as slow as mud and soft snow. On most routes that you end up driving in this game, mud and soft snow might take up around 10% of the distance you have to travel, but they usually take up like 70 to 80% of the time you have to spend traveling that route, which is why I think that the same number of points in mud performance is definitely going to weigh a lot more than the same number of points in dirt performance. However, if one tire type performs significantly better on dirt than another while only being slightly worse in mud as far as these numbers go, then it might be worth choosing it over the alternative. For example, and as a perfect segue into talking about the light scout tires, in the highway section, I would definitely recommend choosing HS1 over HS2. HS2 does have 0.2 points better performance on dirt, but HS1 has 0.2 points better performance in mud. Same numerical difference, but one number weighs significantly more than the other. And on top of that, these numbers are atrociously low for mud and soft snow performance. The HS1s actually come stock on the Chevy CK1500 pickup that you get as a starter vehicle. And if any of you guys can remember, or if any of you guys just recently had to experience that because you just started playing the game, it absolutely just crawls in mud, and it will frequently get completely stuck. That's HS1, so imagine downgrading to something like HS2 and then cutting your mud performance in half. So yeah, HS1 is what comes stock on all of these trucks but the Hummer and Apache anyways, and I recommend that you stick to those until you unlock the all-terrain tires. Once you do unlock the all-terrain Scout tires, it's the same thought process, so go with the AS2s. Yes, the dirt difference is twice more this time, but it's still not as important as the 0.2 difference in mud. Things actually get a little more simple when you get to the off-road tires, because for most of these guys, there's only going to be one choice, and that's OS1. Unfortunately, there isn't an increase at all in mud performance from AS2, but you do get better dirt performance. So do ditch the AS2s and put on the OS1s. The Apache doesn't actually have access to the OS1s. It instead has the TO1s, which is actually these tires right here. They're actually the exact same, they just look a little bit different. The Hummer H2 has custom off-road tires, which apparently performs the same as OS1s in dirt and mud, but is a lot better on asphalt. And even though these are custom tires and they are quite nice, they do not outperform the top of class tires, which is MS1s, that the Hummer does have access to. So when you eventually unlock these, which do unlock later than the off-road tires on all of the trucks, you still want to put them on. And this is of course the case with the other Scouts as well that don't even have the H2 tires. Special note to the Hummer and Apache though, the custom tires that they have do come stock, whereas the rest of the Scouts come stock with the HS1 tires. So if you are at a stage of the game where you haven't even unlocked the OS1 tires yet on the other Scouts and you manage to get your hands on the Hummer or the Apache, it can provide you with a head start. Moving on to the tire sets for actual cargo trucks, and the two Scouts being the LOADSTAR and the F750, which does have access to truck tires. We have a much longer list here, but it's not actually because there's a lot more variety. There is more variety, but the length of the list is mostly caused by the fact that there are two sets of truck tires that essentially are the same, but just unlocked at different levels. You have the U set being the UHD, UAD, and then UODs, which performs the same as the non-U starting set, which is the HMD, the ATMD, and the OHDs. The U and the non-U sets share the same traction numbers, but the U set unlocks earlier, so a truck that has access to the U set instead of the non-U set is going to provide the player with access to better tires at lower ranks, which I guess is helpful in the early game. So UADs have the same performance as ATMDs, but unlocks earlier at a lower rank. It's the same thing with UOD and OHD. So let's go down this list. For highway tires, choose UHD1 or HMD1 depending on what your truck has. FMHD1 on the F750 is just a similar thing with a different name, but it's practically irrelevant since by the time you unlock the F750, you're already going to have access to the UOD2s, which is the top tire for the F750, as well as most trucks that have access to the UOD tires. All-terrain is slightly more interesting. The best tires you can have before unlocking off-road ones is going to be the UAD2s and the ATMD2s. However, a lot of trucks that have access to the ATMDs also have access to the ATHS1. ATHS1 unlocks earlier than the ATMDs, but is still significantly better in terms of traction multipliers than the highway tires. However, they are single tires only, so they do not have double tires on the rear axles, even on trucks that are compatible with that. Even with the reduced surface area on the rear axles, ATHS1 will probably still outperform the highway tires in mud though, just because of how big the difference is in the mud traction multiplier. However, if you are upgrading from double rear highway tires to ATHS1, your truck will become less stable side to side and be more likely to tip, so you might want to keep that in mind the next time you deploy it from the garage and start being more careful when turning corners. Alternatively, if you prefer stability over traction, you can ignore the ATHS1 unlock and just stick with your HMD ones for a little longer until you actually unlock the ATMD2s, which is going to be universally better than both. The P12AT is a custom tire that comes stock on the Pacific P12, but similar to the ATHS1, you want to replace it with ATMD2 as soon as you unlock it because it performs better in terms of both traction and stability. Moving on to off-road and mud tires. On most trucks, your best options are going to be either UOD2 or OHD1, depending on which one your truck has. However, some trucks are incompatible with double tires and thus only have access to OHS1 and OHS2, in which case OHS2 will be slightly better. The ANKO is exclusive to the ANK Mark 38, while it is not as good as UOD2 or the A/TMHS mud tires, both of which the ANK has access to you, it does come stock on the A&K, including the one that you discover in Pedro Bay, Alaska, and is actually not that much worse than the A&K's top tire options. Moving on to mud tires now, the MHS1 is the most widely available type of mud tire. However, it is also the worst among the 5 on this list, and almost never, if not literally never, the best option to run on any truck in the game. The reason for this is because all trucks that have access to MHS1 also has access to OHS, if not also OHD, and when you compare MHS1 to either OHD1 or OHS2, it trades 1 full point of its dirt value for a very marginal increase in mud performance, and it also does not put double tires on the rear axles. What this means is that OHS2 will perform significantly better than MHS1 on dirt, while being only negligibly weaker in mud, whereas OHD1 may outperform it in both dirt and mud because it has a negligibly lower mud traction value, but significantly more surface area. On the one line below MHS1, MHS2 may actually be the best option from the MHS set. However, it is also limited to having only single tires on the rear axles, regardless of whether or not the truck is compatible with doubles. And for whatever reason, all trucks that are incompatible with OHD, because they are incompatible with double rear tires, also do not have MHS2 or MHS3. I don't know why this is, but it's a shame because MHS2 is most likely to come on top when it only has to compete against OHS2 instead of also OHD1. However, it seems like that on any truck where OHD is not available, neither is MHS2 or 3. So with that said, on any trucks where MHS is available, I recommend staying away from them and sticking with OHD1 or OHS2, which not only unlock earlier but also perform better in basically all situations. Any truck that has access to MHS should also have access to at least one of them as well. AMHS and TMHS mud tires are a completely different story though. While they share the same dirt and mud numbers as MHS2, the tires are much wider and they are wider on all axles, not just the rear axles, which greatly increases contact surface area and driving stability. They are only available to a small selection of trucks, mostly trucks that are in desperate need of wide tires to reduce tippiness, such as the Bandit, A&K, or TUZ twins. They're absolutely great, and when they are available, I generally recommend running them over OHD1 or UOD2. Although, if you are upgrading from one of those to the A or TMHS mud tires, do keep in mind that your dirt traction multiplier will drop down by 1 full point, so your truck will handle significantly more slippery on dry off-road surfaces than before, so you might want to account for that in your driving. Moving on, we have what I call the super heavy set. This set of tires is only available to 4 trucks in the entire game. All of them are super heavy trucks. These are called the MSH tires, not to be confused with the MHS mud tires on the last page, which are the widely available and, in my opinion, fairly garbage mud tires. I personally have always used MSH2 myself, but on second thoughts, MSH3 may actually be a better option, especially on the 2 trucks in this category that have articulated steering. The reason for this is because while all 4 of these trucks already perform excellently in mud and soft snow anyways, regardless of which one of the 4 tire options you put on, they are prone to sometimes sliding unpredictably on dirt due to their large weight and high center of mass. While this would only really matter to the Kolob twins when climbing steep inclines, it puts the 745C and the 4220 Antarctic at risk of tipping over on even slight slants and small hills or ditches. The reason why I myself have almost never used MSH3 is because I took a look at this sheet a long time ago when I first wanted to choose tires for one of these trucks, selected MSH2 because it had the highest mud rating because that works on everything else, and it never really came back to review my decision until now. Another note about these 4 trucks is that the MSH1 tires actually come stock on all of them, and it's barely worse than the top options. So overall, you just don't need to stress out too much about choosing between these. Moving on to the Special Scout tires for the YAR 87 and Con Marshall. The all-terrain and off-road options are basically irrelevant because both the YAR and the Marshall come stock with the TM1 mud tires, which is going to be better than anything before. for it. Using the same mud over dirt logic as before, I consider TM2 to be superior to TM1, so I recommend upgrading to it once you unlock it, although unlike on regular Scouts, the stock tires aren't that much worse. While the Marshall has a number of other weaknesses, the fact that the R87 has access to the TM2 tires, and the fact that it has 6 wheels instead of the usual 4 for Scout vehicles puts it at a huge advantage when it comes to performance on tough terrain. The only Scouts that really compete are the LOADSTAR and F750, which have access to the UOD2 truck tires, and while they only have 4 wheels, they do have double tires in the rear, and their tire sizes are at least comparable to what the R87 has, and what they still lack they make up by having superior engine power. Last but not least, there are a couple of trucks in the game that have irreplaceable custom tires, meaning that they come stock with the truck, so you don't have to buy them or unlock them, but you also cannot replace them with anything else. Starting from the top of the list, the T01 on the Tatran is not the same as the T01s on the Chevy Apache. The Tatran's tires are completely different and way better, and yes, that is real. That is a real number. In fact, on BladeChild X's original Reddit post where he shared the spreadsheet, somebody actually brought this up as a potential typo, and BladeChild X himself confirmed that this is indeed the correct value. I have no doubts though, because if you've driven the Tatran for even 15 seconds in deep snow or deep mud, this checks out. It is an absolute outlier when it comes to performance in deep mud and snow. Next up, the Pacific P16 and P512PF also have special OHD1 tires, and while they are called OHD1 in the game, it's a similar situation with the T01 on the Tatran. It is not the same as the widely available normal OHD1s, and it has a much higher traction multiplier in mud. I don't really know how to talk about the rest of this page. Most of it isn't really that worth talking about. I put in some of my own notes on the side and also the top tires from other trucks all on this list. So if you are curious, you can pause the video and read these. That pretty much covers all the tires in the game. Before we move on to chain tires, I just want to quickly address choosing between different tires of the same type. You can argue this, but I say it's simple. Bigger tires are almost always better. Yes, the higher center of mass might make your truck less stable and you'll need to impose a lower speed limit on yourself where you can go fast. But on the flip side, you will move through the slowest and most stressful conditions of your route much faster due to having more tire surface area and ground clearance, which will usually more than get back to lost time on the highway. Now let's talk about chain tires. First of all, just to clear this up, chain tires specialize in ice-plated roads, and ice-plated rock surfaces. They are not the universal best tires, despite being the last tire option you unlock on any truck that has them. Chains perform noticeably worse in deep snow compared to the best off-road/mud tires, which makes them rarely worth the while outside of specific areas with icy roads that have steep sideways slants or steep climbs, most notably in Pedro Bay, Alaska. If you learn to control your throttle instead of always flooring the pedal, ice is not a problem as long as it's mostly flat. There are quite a few contracts in Late Alaska and Big Salmon Peak in Yukon where the game makes you repeatedly deliver large amounts of cargo across long distances, but the routes are mostly iced highways with very little mud and snow in between. Chains can also help there. In my experience, chains are the least helpful in Kola Peninsula because while there is a lot of ice in Kola, the amount of deep snow that you have to deal with is also significant. Ice in Kola can mostly be dealt with using good driving techniques on non-chain tires. Chains will allow you to safely move faster through ice, but at the cost of making you move slower through deep snow. And with how much more deep snow slows you down relative to ice, you really shouldn't be worrying about moving through ice at high speeds. So let's take a look at how the traction multipliers on chain tires compare against each other and against the best non-chain tires available to most trucks. First thing you'll notice is that all the chain tires except CS1 for the Scouts have identical numbers on asphalt, dirt, and mud, and their numbers have pretty much no correlation with their non-chain counterparts that have the same name. This might catch you off guard if you were expecting, say, if U83 has 1.5, 1.7, and 1, U83 chains is just going to have the same numbers but do better on ice, but that is absolutely not the case here. Although, if you are in a situation where you want to use U83 chains, it may be relieving to know that it actually performs just as well in dirt as the best OHD1 and UOD2 off-road tires do, while still performing ever so slightly better than the best all-terrain tires in mud. U83 chains are also special because currently they are the only chain tire options in the game that has a rear chains option, as opposed to just an all chains option. Unfortunately, this is kind of a joke due to the way rear chains work. If you go into the game and select U83 all chains as your tire option, what the game will actually do is put U83 chains on the rear axles of your truck and then regular U83s on the front axles, which I don't know why anybody would ever want, because U83 only outperforms U83 chains on asphalt, whereas everywhere else, including dirt, mud, and ice, the chain variant actually outperforms it by a large margin. Rear-only chain options may have actually been useful for OHD2 and MHS1 chains, because the non-chain counterparts actually do outperform the chain variants in mud. However, the only chain options that does have rear chains is U83 chains, which makes running rear chains in general kind of pointless. That just about covers everything that I can possibly tell you about tires in SnowRunner. I hope you learned something useful that you can apply to your own gameplay. If you did, it would be a great help to me if you could click on the thumbs up button and the subscribe button. It only takes 2 seconds of your time, but it will help me out a ton. If you have any questions or doubts for me, you can also leave a YouTube comment under this video, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. The link to the original tires spreadsheet by BladeChild is in the video description down below. I highly recommend that you bookmark it in your web browser or on your desktop in case you want to reference it in the future. It should continue to be accurate and useful as long as the author continues to update it like they have. Speaking of things to be updated, the data and analysis in this video are based on the state of the game as of early May 2021. If you are watching or referencing this video in the future, please know that between now and then the developers may have rebalanced the numbers or added new trucks or new tire options, which this video will not be able to cover. Personally, I would not expect any major changes to the traction multipliers on most of the existing tires, especially the ones that are available on many different trucks, because I see no benefits and a lot of drawbacks to doing that. New content, though, will definitely continue to come. In fact, at the time of this recording, what is supposedly the biggest update in SnowRunner history is just around the corner. This update introduces the AIMER region, as well as a bunch of new trucks, including the Zix 605R, which uses exclusive tires and is already easily a top contender for the most valuable and useful truck in the entire game, solely based on its performance in the PTS. I did not include the 605R's tire stats in this video because what's on the PTS is not necessarily final, but I'm sure it will be on BladeChild's spreadsheet in no time once the update actually comes out on the release version of the game. That's it for this video, guys. Wish you a great day. Firefly out.